Hello everyone, welcome back. I hope you're having a great day. Well, today we're going to talk a little bit more about Isaac. Last time we told the story about baby Isaac and how he was born when his parents, Abraham and Sarah, were really old. Well, we're going to fast forward a little bit. Isaac is now maybe about 15, 17 years old. He's a strong, healthy teenager, and his name still means laughter. He brought such joy to his mother and father, Abraham and Sarah. Now, growing up, and even as a teenager, Isaac learned to obey Abraham. When Abraham would ask him, "Hey Isaac, I need you to go collect some firewood so that we can start baking some bread," Isaac didn't stand back and say, "Oh, Dad, but I just sat down. Do I really have to?" Oh, no. Isaac jumped up and he went out, and maybe he grabbed some of his buddies and they went out and started collecting the firewood. And they would bring it back. And when his dad would say, "Isaac, would you please go draw some water? We need some fresh water in all the jugs." He didn't just sit down and like, "Dad, I'm taking a nap and it's so hot outside. Can't I just do it later?" Oh, no. He would jump up and he would grab the jars, and again, maybe he would take some of the helpers and they would go fill up the jars. And they were so heavy, full of water, he would lift them up and he would bring them back and set them down. And growing up with all the different work, he got strong. He wasn't just a scrawny little kid. He was a young, healthy, strong teenager. Well, one night, God came and spoke to Abraham again. Last time, if you recall, God spoke to Abraham and asked him to leave his home and move to a place that he would show him. And then God spoke to him and promised him, "I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, or just like the sands on the sea, on the beach." This time God spoke to him, it was a little different. God spoke to him and he says, "Abram, come out of your tent." And he came out, he looked up, and God says, "Abraham, I want you to take your son Isaac, your only son, and I want you to take him to a mountain that I will show you and offer him as a sacrifice." A sacrifice? What? You want me to offer my son Isaac as a sacrifice? Now, Abraham could have started coming up with all kinds of excuses and different ideas in his mind, like maybe he didn't hear that right, or maybe God meant something else, take one of the sheep for a sacrifice. Did he really hear that right? But you know, I believe if God speaks to you, it makes a good imprint on your mind and you remember it well. Abraham understood. He heard what God told him. He didn't understand why God was asking him to do that. But he had learned to obey God. And he knew that God will fulfill his promises. And he didn't understand that if God was going to make his descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and he was going to offer Isaac as a sacrifice, he didn't quite understand how all that was going to work. But he trusted God. And he followed through anyways. Well, that same night, he went and he made preparations, and he got one of the pack animals, maybe it was a donkey, and he loaded it up with some of the firewood, and he made sure that they had some hot coals bundled up in a pouch and that they could take with them to start a new fire with. And then very quietly he went in and he woke up Isaac. He says, "Isaac, Isaac." And Isaac kind of opened his eyes. He says, "Isaac, come outside the tent with me." Well, Isaac kind of rolled over and he walked outside the tent, and Abraham says, "Isaac, God has asked me to go with you, and we're going to make a sacrifice on a mountain that's a ways away from here." And Isaac, he looked around. It was still nighttime. And the stars were out and shining. It was still, like, that's kind of strange. But remember what I said? Isaac had learned to trust and obey his father. He says, "Okay, Dad, let me just say goodbye to Mother real quick, and I'll be right out." "Oh, no. Don't wake your mother. It's okay. She's getting older and she needs her rest. You know, I don't want to wake her up right now or worry her about anything." Okay. And so together they took off. They traveled for 3 days on foot with their pack animal, walking to a mountain that was off in the distance. And I imagine during those 3 days that Abraham, he was turning it over and over and over in his mind, how this was going to happen and what he was going to do. And maybe he was waiting, maybe God would stop him, and he didn't really know. He was still questioning it, but he trusted God. Maybe he didn't talk too much, but Isaac, he probably talked. He didn't know what was really going to happen yet, and he was probably talking as they walked and saying different things. Maybe he asked some questions, and Abraham would respond. And at nighttime, they would make a camp and have if it was cold, maybe they made a fire. Well, after 3 days, they got to the base of the mountain, and Abraham told the helpers that came with him, he says, "You guys stay here. Isaac and I will go up, and we will come back." And as they started heading up the mountain, Isaac finally asked a question that had been on his mind the entire trip. You see, making a sacrifice was not strange. They had done that a lot. They had learned, it had been passed down when God had told Adam and Eve at the very beginning to take a lamb and make a sacrifice, and that lamb would represent Jesus. And so Isaac finally asked the questions. He says, "Father, we've got the firewood, and I see you've packed coals to make a new fire, but where's the lamb? I mean, usually when we make the sacrifices, we have a spotless lamb that we bring with us. Where's the lamb?" And Abraham at first, he says, "Don't worry, my son. Don't worry. God will provide a lamb. It'll be all right." And they continued making their way up the mountain, and maybe it was like a goat trail or something, or a deer trail, I don't know, a path. They made their way up the mountain to a level spot higher up on the mountain, and they got there, and Isaac was still looking around for the sacrifice. Where's the lamb? And Abraham told him, he says, "Okay, help me build this altar here. There's some big boulders over there. Let's roll these over together." And together they pushed them and rolled them, and they built up several rocks together, and they made up an altar. And then finally, Abraham broke down, and he says, "Oh, my son Isaac, God has asked me to offer you as a sacrifice." Now, if you remember, how old is Isaac? 15, 17 years old. He's a strong teenager. At the notion of Father asking me to be a sacrifice on the altar, what do you think Isaac could have done? He could have run away. He could have easily overpowered his father. His father's like 117 years old now. And he could have run away. But do you remember how Isaac was grown up and how he was raised? To always trust his father and obey his father and listen to what his father had to say. And the time came, and he says, "Okay, Father, if God has asked you to do that, I will be a sacrifice." So Isaac, maybe they tied his arms behind his back so it wouldn't be so easy to chicken out and run away at the last minute. I don't know. But Isaac was up there, on there, and Abraham took the knife, and he raised up the knife, and right before he was about to bring it down to kill Isaac, an angel interrupted him. Maybe the angel even held his arm from coming down at the last moment. Maybe it was right before Abraham was about to come down. But an angel came down and he stopped him and says, Abraham, stop! Stop! God has seen that you trust him even to give your own son up to him, and that you love him more than anything. And God will reward you. Do not offer your son as a sacrifice anymore. Off to the side, all of a sudden they heard there was a ram, a male sheep that was caught in the bushes. They were both so overjoyed. Oh, they hugged each other and they went over and they grabbed the ram and they brought it over and they used the ram as a sacrifice to God. Oh, Abraham's heart was lifted so much on the way down the hill. And this story is in the Bible to remind us that God gave us his own son as Jesus, as a sacrifice to take my sin away and your sin away so that we can live forever and ever and ever. I want you to always remember you can trust in God and his promises to you. I hope you have a great day.